Justin, thank you very much for joining us again.
Thank you.
You've just come back from the region. Where have you been, and what is the situation on the ground?
So when I first arrived in Europe in December, I was in Croatia for 1 month. And then after that, I went to Greece, where I was on the island of Chios for a few months, and then I was transferred to Athens. So the situation on the ground in Athens right now is one of a sense of desperation and very chaotic in some respects. There are people who are on the border with Macedonia in Domeni, and they are currently just hoping that the border will be opened, but it probably won't be. There are others that are in Athens and other cities in and around central Greece, and they've been dispersed and they're staying in camps. And then there are the people that arrived after the EU-Turkey deal, and they are actually currently on the islands and they're being processed, and that is taking some time, and there's current issues regarding that are being worked out by the Greek government and also the EU.
Did you get the chance to talk to these people? Where are they all coming from? Are they all escaping wars and conflicts in their regions?
Well, I did get the chance to speak with them. According to the UN, if I remember the statistics correctly, about 40% are Syrians, then 30% are Afghans, and then after that come Iraqis and Iranians. And quite a few are indeed fleeing war, especially the Syrians, and also those from Afghanistan and Iraq. The ones from Iran, obviously, not necessarily fleeing war, but there are a few of them. And they all come for various different reasons, but yes, quite a few are indeed fleeing from war.
What is the biggest challenge the international community is facing regarding the refugee crisis?
The biggest challenge at the moment is, in Greece at least, where I was, trying to begin the process of registering and legally processing the claims and the asylum applications for all these individuals who have arrived, because the Greek government is having a very challenging time to process over 50,000 people who have now arrived, and there's no place for them to go. They don't want to go back to Turkey, so many are now trying to claim asylum. And it's proving to be difficult, and there's challenges regarding where they're being allowed to stay. Obviously, the camps are all over Greece in various degrees of quality, run by various groups. Some are run by the UN, some by other NGOs, some by the Greek government and the Greek military. So it's a logistical challenge as well, trying to feed and house all of these people, and the resources of the Greek government are quite stretched.
What these people want? Do they want to reach Europe, or do they hope they can go back sometime later?
Well, the goal for many when they arrived in Greece was indeed to reach Germany or Austria, or maybe Denmark. There were quite a few that had relatives that had come earlier, and so that they were in Denmark or Sweden. But I think now at this point, many of them, they just don't want to be sent back to Turkey, so they're trying to apply for asylum in Greece. And the question of whether they would go back, I'm sure there are a few that would definitely go back to, for example, Syria if the situation was better. I once met one gentleman who he was from Syria. He had been living in one city, and it started being bombed by Assad. So he fled to another city. That city got bombed by Assad, so then he fled to another city where it got captured by ISIS. And so he fled that city, and he ended up coming to Europe. And obviously, going to Europe wasn't necessarily his first choice, but he's fled 3 times now, so he felt like he had nowhere else to go at this point. So some would probably return. I'm sure some would probably be interested in staying to try to pursue new futures and economic opportunities in Europe.
Are there many children and women among refugees?
Absolutely. There's quite a large number of women and children that are coming. And those tend to be some of the more vulnerable groups as well. Women who are traveling by themselves tend to be some of the most vulnerable, and women with family members who, for example, husbands that are, in the case of Syrians, arrested by Assad or they were killed in the fighting, that have now come by themselves with their children. There were quite a few of those cases. quite often we had families of Yazidis come through as well from Iraq. They were in situations where you could, I remember one family where there was a 8-year-old boy that was traveling with his uncle because both of his parents were killed by ISIS. And so he was the only one left of his family, and he was traveling with his uncle at that point.
So many of them left areas under ISIS control.
Quite a few. We had people come from Raqqa. We had people come from different parts of Iraq. In Syria as well, there were quite a few, and I'd say actually even more that seemed to be fleeing Assad and the forces backing Assad. And so we heard many stories of people that were fleeing bombings from Assad and the Russian Air Force. And so it was, if they came from Syria, it was about a 50-50 whether or not they were fleeing ISIS or they were fleeing Assad, basically.
What is the real economic impact the refugee crisis makes on Europe's economy?
As far as Greece goes, again, it's very difficult for Greece at the moment. They were in the middle of an economic and political crisis before this happened. And now there's thousands of people who necessarily didn't want to be in Greece, but are now stuck in Greece for all practical purposes. And they're doing the best they can to provide assistance, but it's proving to be very much of a challenge in stretching their already very much stretched resources. In Europe in general, I think the issue is proving to be more of a political challenge in some ways than an economic one, and that's going to be interesting to see how that develops in the future.
And one more question, what should be done to stop these horrors of those people?
Well, in the case of Syria, it would be best to begin to try to work towards some sort of political settlement. As long as the situation continues, there's going to continue to be refugees, as you have two very harsh regimes, whether it be ISIS or whether it be Assad, that are forcing essentially thousands of people to flee fighting. And so that would be one of the ways to move towards that. And the fighting, and people from Afghanistan as well, there's still conflict with the Taliban. I remember we had there was one family from Afghanistan who they had fled because their husband had been killed by the Taliban, and quite a few people that had fled because they had worked with the US forces or worked with the coalition forces as translators or at American embassies that were under threat, and so they had to flee as well, and they were just trying to make their way to Europe to start again. Unfortunately, as long as these conflicts are continuing, I think we'll be in a situation where there will continue to be more refugees, and we will see this continue for a while.
Justin Roy, thank you very much for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.